You are listening to the Embrace the Mud podcast, where we discuss all things related to healthy, joyful, and life-giving relationships. Why focus on relationships? Because the quality of our intimate partnerships and close connections influences our health, happiness, and longevity more than anything else in our lives. Relationships matter a lot, so together, let's jump into the mud, aka our messy relationships, pull some weeds, plant some seeds, and create an enriching environment where strong relationships can take root. I am your grateful host, Dara Posner. I am a relational disaster working toward relational mastery. I am also a positive psychology coach, a relational mindset coach, a blogger, and now a podcaster. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Embrace the Mud podcast, where we discuss all things related to healthy, joyful, life-giving relationships. If you are a fan of this podcast, please subscribe, follow, like, review, and share. Your engagement in this way is crucial to the success of the podcast, and I appreciate you taking just a few seconds to support my mission, which is to help people like you flourish in life and love. So many of us struggle with boundary setting in our relationships. I find that this is just one of those things that a lot of people have a really, really hard time with. And even though boundaries are, pretty widely talked about now, and there's lots of information, there still remains so much confusion about how to set a boundary and what a healthy boundary really looks like. And just the importance and essential nature of having boundaries in your relationships. And so today I'm going to hopefully be able to give you some guidance on how to set boundaries in your relationship that feels really loving and honoring toward yourself, your partner, and your relationship, so that it will hopefully become more accessible as a practice. So to start us off, I really want to just help you appreciate how vital and essential having healthy boundaries in a relationship is. It's essential for, promoting the health of your relationship, and it's also essential for promoting a healthy relationship with yourself and maintaining self-respect. So if you ever are tempted to consider that boundaries are negotiable, assuming that you are interested in cultivating a healthy, joyful, life-giving relationship, which is what we're all about here on the Embrace the Mud podcast, then setting boundaries is non-negotiable. It is essential. So really just fully committing to figuring out how to set clear boundaries in your relationship with love. That would be the first step. And that love piece is important because, setting boundaries with love means doing so from a place of compassion and care for yourself and for your partner. Boundaries are not about building walls, which is what I know a lot of people think, but they're really about creating a safe and nurturing space for growth in your relationship. And if you're interested in that, then I really want you to appreciate that is what boundary setting can do. It will really create an environment in your relationship that feels safe and nurturing, so that growth, evolution, and expansion become possible for you both. A huge aspect of setting appropriate boundaries is spending enough time in self-reflection. You want to reflect on your values, your needs, and your limits in order to gain clarity on what boundaries are necessary for your well-being. And then once you have that clarity, then you want to go to your partner and you want to communicate your boundaries. And the key here is that you want to communicate with empathy. You want to communicate with empathy and understanding by using I statements to express your needs and your feelings. And you want to definitely refrain from blaming or being accusatory at a time where you're trying to communicate your boundaries. And you want to be as clear and specific as possible. You want to clearly state, here's what's acceptable to me. Here's, what's not acceptable to me. And the key being, communicating what's acceptable and not in a respectful and assertive way. Another really important thing to consider when you're trying to create just, a healthy mindset around boundaries in your relationship is that you have to respect the other person's boundaries and make that a top priority. In fact, you want to make the other person's boundaries equally as important as your own. And you want to communicate that you're interested in understanding and honoring their limits as well. Something I don't think we talk about enough when we talk about boundaries is that, we want to stay firm, but also be flexible. We want to stay firm about important boundaries while being open to revisiting and adjusting them as circumstances change, as your relationship grows and evolves, the longer you are together. You want to be able to be a flexible and, go back and from time to time revisit and make adjustments where it might make sense to do so. So we've talked about the importance of being really clear about what your boundaries are, meaning, being clear about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. You want to communicate in a loving, respectful, empathic way while being really assertive and firm. And that's kind of part one of boundary setting. Part two is having clarity about what the consequences will be if there's a boundary violation. And you want to communicate that consequence and be prepared to enforce it if necessary. Boundaries often lose meaning in relationships because they're not respected. And the person who has to respect that boundary, first and foremost, is you. And so you want to know what the boundary is. You want to communicate that effectively. And then you want to also make it really, really clear. Here's what's going to happen if this boundary is violated. And that could be really hard to do because it can feel threatening. But something that I like to do with my partner is I like to remind him that all of this, my boundary and the consequence, all are in place because I care so much about him, myself, and the relationship, and that is my priority. So, an example of that would be, like if your boundary is it's not acceptable to me for anyone to yell at me. So please don't yell at me. And the boundary really is, if you yell at me, because you can't control someone else's behavior, right? Boundaries aren't about telling people what they cannot do. It's about telling them what you find acceptable and not acceptable, and then what you'll do if, the unacceptable thing is what's happening. So you can choose to yell at me. That's your choice. But if you do, I'm not going to stick around and stay in this conversation, right? So you want to make it really, really clear what will happen. Practicing self-care is a really important, I think, aspect of boundaries. And that's because, when we practice self-care, it's a way of reinforcing for ourselves that we matter. We have to matter to ourselves. We have to show love to ourselves. I think this, for many of us, is where the struggle lies, right? Is that we don't have that relationship with ourselves. So practicing self-care and being really, really committed to a practice of self-care is a way to reinforce our boundaries, to show love for ourselves, and to demonstrate to anyone who's witnessing this that, we do matter to ourselves and that our boundaries really matter to us. As I mentioned at the outset, a lot of us struggle with boundaries. This is an area of difficulty for many, many of us. And so, if you're really being challenged here, it's okay to seek support. And sometimes that support can come from friends or family, or it could be a coach or a therapist if needed. And, because setting boundaries in relationships and doing so successfully and doing so mutually is such an important, non-negotiable aspect of having a flourishing relationship. If this is an area where you just keep getting tripped up, please seek support. Turn to a trusted friend, turn to a trusted family member, or hire a professional to help you with this. It's so, so worth it. And last but not least, remember to celebrate your progress. Celebrate your progress in setting and maintaining clear boundaries. And remember, it is a journey, and every step forward is worth celebrating. All right, so just a quick little summary of what we just laid out here for you. Number one, remember that setting boundaries with love is an essential aspect of healthy relationships and to have a healthy relationship with yourself. Remember that it's a process and it's an act of self-love and a way to create more fulfillment and balance in your relationships. This is ongoing, learning to set clear boundaries. And, it's an act of self-care. It's a way to show self-respect. So when you're doing this, remember to prioritize that relationship with yourself and communicate with your partner in an empathic way. Remember to be firm yet flexible. Celebrate your progress along the way. And, just remember that setting these healthy boundaries will promote love and harmony in your relationship. And it's so worth, kind of going through the struggle and figuring this thing out. Along the way, let compassion be your guide and let understanding be the language that you use, and let love flourish in the nurturing space that you create between yourself and your partner as you set clear boundaries with love. Okay, I hope you found that helpful. That is all I have for you today, but I will be back very soon with another episode for you here on the Embrace the Mud podcast. In the meantime, please remember you are wired for love and connection. You are capable of love and connection. You are worthy of love and connection. I'll see you soon.